Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take your sources, pull out the really key insights, and help you get up to speed thoroughly and hopefully pretty quickly.
And today, we're diving into something really profound. It's about human reason itself, its incredible successes, but also its pretty alarming failures.
Yeah, it feels like the defining question of our time, doesn't it? Is our collective ability to be rational, as a society, is it keeping pace with scientific breakthroughs, or are we hitting some kind of wall?
It's a real paradox.
Right.
I mean, on one hand, you've got humanity often working with sophisticated AI, solving problems we once thought were impossible, real revolutions in science.
Right.
But then you look at our public conversations, especially around politics and social issues, and it just seems to be, crumbling. Lots of irrationality, lots of division. It's quite jarring.
It really is a stark contrast. When I think about the absolute peak of collective rationality, what we can achieve when we put our minds together, something like AlphaFold springs to mind. What is it about DeepMind's protein folding work that really stands out for you as the cutting edge?
Oh, AlphaFold's a perfect example. It's just this monumental achievement, a showcase of what harnessed collective rationality can do. So back in 2020, DeepMind's AlphaFold system and then AlphaFold 2, they tackled this huge problem, the 50-year protein folding grand challenge.
Which had baffled biologists for decades, right?
Exactly. How do you predict the incredibly complex 3D shape of a protein just from its linear sequence of amino acids? And knowing that structure is absolutely fundamental. It tells you how life works, how diseases happen, and crucially, how to design new drugs.
And the breakthrough wasn't small.
Not at all. The really astonishing part, by 2022, AlphaFold 2 had predicted structures for pretty much all known proteins. That's around 200 million of them.
200 million. It's almost hard to wrap your head around that number. What did that mean practically as a leap forward?
It was genuinely a 3 orders of magnitude leap. Think about it. Before AlphaFold, human labs, even the best ones with brilliant people in top gear, they might solve, maybe a few dozen structures a year, sometimes just a handful. It was painstaking work.
Right, slow and laborious.
Incredibly. Yeah. And then AlphaFold comes along and gives us structures for 200 million proteins. To put that in perspective, manually, that would have taken human labs literally tens of thousands of years.
Wow.
Yeah. So it wasn't just a step forward. It fundamentally changed the entire field of biology, like overnight.
Yeah.
It's just crystal clear evidence of how human insight, combined with AI processing power, when it's really focused, can expand knowledge on a scale we've never seen before, pushing the boundaries.
And yet, and this is the paradox, this amazing scientific leap happened alongside this really disturbing trend in our collective conversation. It really does feel like it's melting down sometimes, especially when you look at partisan polarization getting so much worse. It's not just disagreement anymore, is it? It's deeper.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about effector polarization. It's that emotional distance between political groups. It's where the dislike, sometimes even real animosity, for the other side starts to outweigh any common ground you might find on actual policy.
And you have data showing this has worsened.
Yes, quite dramatically. Yeah. Take the U.S. data. In 1978, the effective polarization gap, basically, how much warmer you feel towards your own party compared to the rival one, was about 27 points.
Okay.
By 2016, that gap had nearly doubled. It shot up to 46 points. That represents this widening emotional chasm, like two tectonic plates just grinding further and further apart, creating these really deep, often hostile splits in society.
And you can feel the real-world consequences of that gap, can't you? It's not just numbers.
No, not at all. It plays out constantly. You see it in the news every day, political gridlock on critical issues, but also just how it affects communities, how people relate to each other or fail to. One study put it very bluntly. When opposing camps cease to respect each other, it's harder to make political compromises and create good public policy.
And this isn't just an American thing, right? It feels global.
It really does. We're seeing these pervasive issues everywhere. Misinformation, false or misleading stuff spreading like wildfire, often deliberately. Then you have echo chambers, these sort of digital bubbles where you only hear voices that confirm what you already think, shutting out anything that challenges it.
Right, reinforcing biases.
Precisely.
Oh.
And then there's tribalism, that really powerful basic human instinct to form us versus them groups. And often loyalty to the tribe overrides any kind of fact-based reasoning. All these things create an environment where evidence and logic often get sidelined in favor of emotional appeals and group identity. It just chips away at our collective ability to have productive conversations.
So you've got these two incredibly stark opposing trends. Amazing scientific reasons soaring, collective discourse may be plummeting. Which brings us right back to the core question for this deep dive. Is our collective rationality actually still rising along with science? Or have we fundamentally hit some kind of ceiling? That's really the puzzle we need to unpack.
It is. And it forces us to think about, the different kinds of rationality. Individual problem solving seems to be doing okay in some areas, but maybe societal coordination is struggling. What's driving these opposite movements? And what does it tell us about human intelligence, really, and where it's headed?
Exactly. And that's what we'll dig into. We're going to look at the latest trends in human intelligence itself. We'll debate the ultimate limits for humans and for AI. And then we'll try to sketch out some, plausible scenarios for what the future of reason in society might look like.
And the goal is to bring it all together at the end.
Right. We're aiming to distill this into an actionable foresight framework. We're calling it a high-stakes decision-making checklist. It's meant to synthesize the best insights from everything we look at, giving you practical tools, toolkit tiles, if you like, to navigate this incredibly complex, fast-changing world. Whether you're interested in science, philosophy, political science, understanding these dynamics is just crucial.
It really touches on everything.
Okay, so we've set the stage with this really striking paradox. Let's dive a bit deeper now into that contrast, the peak of scientific reason versus this decline in collective discourse.
Yeah, and AlphaFold really does crystallize that peak so well. The protein folding grand challenge, as we mentioned, wasn't just some minor puzzle. It was a truly fundamental problem in biology.
Right. Explain that a bit more. Why was predicting the 3D structure so important?
Because a protein's intricate three-dimensional shape directly dictates its function in the cell. It's everything. If you want to understand how cells work, how diseases develop, or, crucially, how to design new drugs that target specific proteins, you need to know that structure.
And AlphaFold 2 didn't just chip away at it. It essentially cracked it.
Yeah.
How did it do that? Was it just throwing massive computing power at the problem?
It was more sophisticated than just brute force. It was this really clever combination of collective rationality, meaning the human insights that went into designing the algorithms and models and advanced computation, the sheer processing power of AI.
So a kind of synergy.
Exactly, a symbiotic relationship. Human ingenuity guiding AI power. And the impact, the sheer scale of it, which is unprecedented in terms of expanding biological knowledge.
Yeah.
Like we said, a human lab might solve one structure in months, painstakingly. AlphaFold. Structures for 200 million proteins, a task that would have taken tens of thousands of years manually. It just shows the incredible power of reason when it's well-directed and amplified by the right tools. It makes you think reason's potential, when applied like this, is almost limitless.
Almost. But then we turn to the other side of the coin, this abyss of collective rationality, vividly shown by that rising effective polarization.
Right, that emotional gulf between political groups where, disliking the other side becomes more important than agreeing on solutions. It's like those tectonic plates grinding apart, creating these deep emotional fault lines in society.
And you mentioned the historical trend, that gap widening significantly over decades.
Yes, the U.S. data is stark. From about 27 points in 1978 to 46 points by 2016. That's not a sudden blip. It's a long, slow erosion of civility and maybe even shared reality.
And the real-world consequences are more than just political deadlock.
Right? Oh, definitely. Beyond gridlock on policy, it affects everything. Community cohesion suffers. People find it harder to connect across these divides. That study saying when respect breaks down, good policy becomes harder. You see that play out constantly.
Globally, you've got misinformation, echo chambers, tribalism.
Exactly. Misinformation spreading rapidly, making truth hard to pin down. Echo chambers reinforcing existing beliefs, shutting out alternatives. And tribalism, that us versus them instinct, often trumping facts and logic.
It creates an environment where reasoned discussion just struggles to take root.
It really does. Emotional appeals, group identity, they become dominant. So even with these incredible scientific triumphs showing what reason can do, we're left asking, is our collective rationality actually keeping up? Or has it hit some kind of ceiling? That fundamental paradox just hangs there.
Okay, let's unpack this. We've just explored a fascinating paradox. On one hand, incredible leaps in scientific rationality like AlphaFold revolutionizing biology. On the other, a worrying decline in our collective social rationality, seen in things like the escalating partisan polarization. It raises the core question of this deep dive. Are we collectively getting smarter or hitting a ceiling?
What's fascinating here is the contrast. It prompts us to consider the different dimensions of rationality, individual problem solving versus societal coordination. This raises an important question. What's driving these divergent trends? And what do they tell us about the fundamental nature of human intelligence and its future?
That leads us perfectly into our next chapter, looking at the actual trends in human intelligence and reasoning. For a long time, maybe most of the 20th century, we saw this steady rise in average cognitive ability, the Flynn effect, right?
That's right. The Flynn effect is that well-documented observation that average IQ scores rose pretty dramatically throughout the 20th century. It's like society got a gradual cognitive upgrade over generations.
And this was confirmed globally.
Yes, a big meta-analysis in 2023 looked at data from all over the world and confirmed a really remarkable gain, about 30 IQ points worldwide between 1948 and 2020.
30 points, that's huge.
It's massive. It's several standard deviations on an IQ test. It basically means the average person today would score much, much higher on the tests used back then compared to their grandparents. The causes are debated, but it strongly points to environmental factors, things like better nutrition, more widespread and longer schooling, maybe even just more exposure to abstract thinking in modern life.
So this upward trend was pretty consistent for decades, but has it continued? What's been happening more recently, say since the 90s?
That's where the story takes a twist. We're seeing a plateauing of those gains. Since around the 1990s, that steady cognitive upgrade has significantly slowed down. In many developed countries, it's basically leveled off.
The gains stopped.
Or slowed right down. The data shows it decelerated from maybe 2.4 IQ points per decade in the mid-20th century to about 1.8 points per decade after 1985. This really suggests we might be hitting some kind of fundamental limits, biological or environmental.
Limits? Like what?
Well, one cognitive scientist used a great analogy. Trees can't reach the sky. It suggests there might be an asymptotic limit to our biological cognitive potential. Our brains, given current conditions, might be bumping up against basic physiological or developmental ceilings.
So we can't just keep getting smarter indefinitely through better food and schools alone?
That seems to be the implication. Not in terms of that raw, measured IQ anyway. We made huge gains lifting the floor in the 20th century. But maybe the ceiling for the average biological brain under current conditions is being approached. It's also worth noting some wealthy countries have even reported slight declines in recent years. Now, those results are debated, could be methodological issues, but the overall picture points towards our biological potential hitting a kind of plateau.
Okay, so the hardware, our physical brains, might be reaching a limit in terms of raw IQ scores. But what about the software? Are we getting better at using the intelligence we have? Better reasoning skills?
That's a really crucial distinction. And yes, there's evidence pointing towards qualitative improvements in how we reason, largely thanks to better education and access to analytical tools.
Like what kind of improvements?
Well, think about statistical and scientific literacy. They seem to be on the rise, broadly speaking.
Yeah.
Basic literacy itself is at a historic high. Over 4/5 of the world can read and write now. That's a huge improvement.
Massive change over generations.
Huge. And beyond just reading, more people are going to secondary and university education than ever before. This means more exposure to fundamental concepts, basic probability, logical reasoning, the scientific method, how to think systematically.
And does the information age itself play a role? All the data, online courses?
Absolutely. The sheer availability of information, things like online courses, even data-driven news reports, exposes ordinary people to concepts that used to be confined to, stats classes. Things like understanding margins of error in polls, or that critical difference between correlation and causation.
Right, the classic ice cream sales and drownings example. Both go up in summer, but one doesn't cause the other.
Exactly. People are more familiar with that kind of thinking now. Our source calls this the literacy of rationality, the ability to think statistically and critically, which seems to be rising alongside traditional literacy.
And awareness of our own cognitive flaws. Things like biases.
That too. Think about the impact of popular psychology and behavioral economics over the last few decades. Books by people like Daniel Kahneman or Steven Pinker. They've really popularized the idea of cognitive biases. People now have labels for things like confirmation bias. Seeking out evidence that confirms what you already think, or regression to the mean, where extreme results tend to be followed by more average ones.
Does knowing the label actually help us avoid the bias?
That's debatable. Behavior change is hard. But awareness is definitely the first step. Just having the language to identify a potential reasoning error in yourself or others is a significant software upgrade.
So this fits with Steven Pinker's overall optimistic view.
It does. Paker consistently argues that looking at the big picture, global knowledge and reasoning skills have improved. He points to record highs in overall education levels, scientific output, problem-solving capacity, and links these directly to concrete improvements in human well-being worldwide.
So the analogy holds. Human hardware, our brains, might be plateauing in raw potential, but our software, our reasoning training, tools, bias awareness, is still getting updates, even if it's unevenly distributed.
Precisely. And that distinction sets up the next big question perfectly. If our individual wetware is hitting limits, what does that mean for our collective intelligence, especially now that powerful AI is entering the equation?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we're seeing human brains, our biological hardware, reaching a kind of asymptote in raw cognitive ability, as evidenced by the plateauing of the Flynn effect. This raises an important question. If individual wetware is reaching its limits, where does that leave our collective intelligence?
Here's where it gets really interesting, because at the same time, our software, our education, our critical thinking skills, our awareness of biases is still evolving. So the question isn't just about how smart we can get, but how smart we can be with the right tools. And that brings us directly to artificial intelligence.
Exactly. If our biological hardware has limits, maybe AI is the key to boosting our collective intelligence. The idea of AI as a cognitive prosthetic is really compelling.
It is. Many experts are quite optimistic about this. If humans are near their biological ceiling, AI augmentation could potentially lift us to whole new levels of collective problem solving and understanding. It's seen as a tool that can extend our reasoning abilities, pull insights from massive data sets we could never process alone, and even help correct for some of our inherent human errors and biases.
Can you give some concrete examples of how this prosthetic works in practice?
Sure. Think about medicine. AI systems are already helping doctors spot patterns in medical images, like X-rays or scans that the human eye might struggle to see, potentially leading to much earlier diagnoses for diseases like cancer.
Right, picking up subtle signals.
Exactly. Or in finance, AI can analyze market data at a speed and scale far beyond human capacity, helping to predict outcomes or manage risk. It's about augmenting human capabilities in areas where we have limitations.
And the research seems to show that human AI teams can actually do better than either humans or AI working alone.
Yes, but with a really important caveat: only under the right conditions. The key principle here, highlighted in a recent review, is complementarity.
Complementarity, meaning they do different things well.
Precisely. The idea is that AI should handle the tasks humans are typically bad at: crunching millions of data points, finding obscure correlations, performing repetitive tasks flawlessly. While humans focus on what AI currently lacks, things like deep contextual understanding, ethical judgment, grasping nuanced human values, genuine creativity.
So can you paint a picture of that ideal collaboration, maybe back that medical diagnosis example?
Okay, imagine an AI analyzing thousands of lung scans. It flags a tiny, subtle anomaly in one patient's scan that might indicate an early-stage tumor, something easily missed by a human radiologist reviewing hundreds of scans.
Okay, so the AI flags it, then what?
Then the human doctor takes over. They don't just accept the AI's flag blindly. They synthesize that specific piece of information with the patient's entire complex medical history, their personal preferences and values regarding treatment options, and the complex ethical considerations involved. It's this powerful blend of computational pattern finding and human wisdom, leading to a much better, more informed, and more humane outcome.
That makes sense. And this could apply much more broadly.
Absolutely. Think about optimizing traffic flow across an entire city network in real time. We're creating much more accurate climate models to predict complex environmental shifts, even potentially in our daily lives, with smart assistants automating routine tasks, freeing up our own mental bandwidth for higher-level thinking, problem-solving, or creativity. That's the optimistic vision.
But there's always a but, isn't there? This optimistic view has a shadow side. The source calls it the dark twin, the risk of algorithmic nudging and manipulation.
Yes, this is the serious downside. The very same algorithms that can assist us can also learn to exploit our known cognitive biases and subtly sway our choices, often completely without our conscious awareness.
How does that work? Who's doing the nudging?
Well, often it's driven by commercial interests. Companies use sophisticated AI-driven personalization to guide user behavior. Not by force, obviously, but by subtly nudging people into actions that are desirable. For the company's bottom line, that is. Not necessarily desirable for the user's actual well-being.
The Cambridge Analytica scandal comes to mind here. That felt like a wake-up call.
It was a huge wake-up call. That case showed how machine learning models could be used to create hyper-tailored political messages delivered through social media, designed specifically to subconsciously tilt people's voting preferences based on their psychological profiles. It really exposed the hidden power of this kind of algorithmic influence on a massive scale.
And we see versions of this every day online, right? In our feeds, recommendations.
Exactly. Platforms like Facebook's newsfeed, YouTube's recommendation engine, they use AI primarily to optimize for metrics like engagement, watch time, or maybe sales conversions. And in doing that, they are effectively learning how to hack our attention and emotions, as the source puts it.
Which raises some really big ethical questions.
Huge ones, like who gets to decide what behavior is desirable? And what happens if maximizing clicks or watch time, the algorithm's goal leads to outcomes that are actually harmful for individuals or society? Things like pushing people towards extremist content, deepening polarization, or spreading conspiracy theories simply because they generate strong reactions and thus high engagement.
I remember reading about the inversion problem mentioned by researchers like John Kleinberg. What's that about?
That's a really critical concept. Kleinberg and his colleagues warned in 2024 that these personalized algorithmic nudges often fail completely to capture a person's true interests or welfare. The AI systems focus on predicting and steering observable behavior, clicks, views, likes, purchases, because that's easy to measure. But they don't, and currently can't, really understand the underlying human needs, values, or long-term goals.
Can you give an example?
Sure. The source uses the example of a video platform. You might click on a conspiracy theory video out of sheer curiosity, or maybe even fear or morbid interest. The algorithm sees the click, interprets it as preference, and then floods your feed with more similar content. It ends up reinforcing a potentially skewed or harmful worldview, even if that's absolutely not what you truly want or need for your own well-being. It mistakes a fleeting behavior for a deep-seated interest.
And when that happens to millions of people?
In aggregate, these AI-driven nudges can have really significant effects. They can distort public opinion, amplify extremism by creating filter bubbles and rabbit holes, and subtly erode individual autonomy by constantly guiding our choices without our explicit awareness or consent. It's a very fine line we're walking.
So it really is an ethical tightrope. On one side, you have intelligence amplification, AI, making us smarter, more rational. On the other, machine-enhanced manipulation, AI exploiting our irrational quirks for someone else's profit or power.
Exactly. And which way we lean heavily depends on how we design, govern, and regulate these powerful algorithms.
What are some proposed guidelines to stay on the right side of that tightrope?
Key ideas include making AI assistants much more transparent. Users need to know when and how their choices are being influenced. And crucially, the AIs need to be aligned with human values. That means optimizing not just for clicks or short-term engagement, but for genuine user well-being, informed choice, and positive societal outcomes.
Which sounds incredibly difficult to actually implement.
It is incredibly difficult, and it's only going to get harder with advances like generative AI, things that can create hyper-personalized text, images, even deep fakes, those incredibly realistic synthetic videos or audio clips. The potential for deception at scale is enormous, making that ethical tightrope even thinner and more precarious.
So ultimately, it sounds like society has a conscious choice to make. Is AI going to be a ladder to augment our rationality or a funnel to shape our behavior, often behind the scenes?
That is the fundamental choice. We have to decide which role we want AI to play. It's not predetermined.
So what does this all mean? We've seen AI's incredible potential as a cognitive prosthetic, enhancing our abilities when humans and AI work together, each doing what they're best at. But we've also stared into the dark twin of algorithmic manipulation, where AI exploits our biases, not always for our benefit. It's truly an ethical tightrope.
This raises an important question. If our biological limits are being met, and AI offers this double-edged sword, what are the ultimate bounds of intelligence itself? And perhaps even more critically, can our collective institutions and human nature handle such power? This moves us into the grand debate about superintelligence.
That's a huge question. If our own brains have limits, and AI is this powerful but potentially dangerous tool, what are the absolute upper limits? Could intelligence, artificial or otherwise, just keep growing indefinitely? This brings us to the bounded superintelligence debate.
Exactly. It's a core philosophical and scientific question. Are there ultimate limits to intelligence itself? And even if intelligence could theoretically be unbounded, could our civilization actually handle it? Could we manage something vastly smarter than ourselves?
What are the main camps in this debate?
Well, on one side, you have thinkers like Nick Bostrom, who argue that artificial superintelligence, or ASI, could potentially far exceed human intellect across all domains. He raises the possibility of an intelligence explosion, an AI rapidly improving itself, leading to exponential growth in its capabilities with no obvious ceiling in sight.
The runaway AI scenario.
Kind of. On the other side, you have skeptics, often drawing from complexity theory, who argue there might be hard limits imposed by fundamental physics, or the inherent complexity of certain problems, or maybe just diminishing returns, getting smarter and smarter, yield smaller and smaller advantages after a certain point.
How can we structure thinking about these different kinds of limits?
Our source suggests a useful three-layer model. Think about biological bounds, computational bounds, and institutional bounds on rationality.
Okay, let's start with the biological bounds, the limits of wetware. We touched on this already. Our human brains aren't infinite processors.
Definitely not. We have a finite number of neurons. Our brains consume a huge amount of energy, their metabolic limits. And they carry evolutionary baggage. They evolved primarily for survival in specific ancestral environments, not necessarily for pure abstract logic or navigating complex modern societies.
And the IQ plateau we discussed fits here.
It strongly suggests we might be nearing the practical limits of our biological gray matter, at least under current conditions. It links back to Herbert Simon's classic concept of bounded rationality.
Simon's idea that we satisfice.
Right. Because we don't have infinite time, knowledge, or computing power, we usually settle for good enough solutions rather than always finding the absolute mathematically optimal one. We take shortcuts.
And we have specific cognitive bottlenecks too, right?
Oh, yeah. Concrete examples.
Yeah.
Our working memory is famously limited. Most people can only actively juggle about, 7 plus or minus 2 chunks of information at once. Try remembering a long phone number without writing it down.
It's
very. And our basic intuitions, shaped for survival on the savannah, they really struggle with things like grasping very large numbers or probability or understanding concepts like exponential growth or the weirdness of quantum mechanics. These aren't things our brains naturally evolved to handle well.
So even experts make mistakes because of these limits.
Routinely. Even the smartest humans err on complex tasks because of these inherent constraints. Now, technology writing, math, computers has massively extended our effective cognitive reach. We can do things far beyond our raw brain power. But the wetware itself, the biological brain, seems to have a stubborn ceiling.
I like Steven Pinker's point that we shouldn't expect humans to become perfect logicians.
Exactly. Pinker emphasizes we'll always grapple, to some degree, with our tribal instincts, our susceptibility to authority, maybe even tendencies towards magical thinking. It's baked in.
So the implication for collective rationality is clear. Big future improvements probably depend more on better tools and institutions that compensate for these individual limits rather than hoping for some sudden biological upgrade in everyone's brain.
Precisely. Which brings us to the second layer. Computational AI bounds. The limits of silicon. Could machines truly become infinitely intelligent?
What's the consensus there?
The general consensus in computer science is probably not. Even machines face fundamental limits. For one, there's the issue of computational complexity. Some problems, known as NP-hard problems, are just inherently incredibly difficult to solve. Exactly.
Like the traveling salesman problem.
That's a classic example. Finding the absolute shortest route connecting many cities becomes computationally infeasible very quickly. AI can find very good approximations, but maybe not the perfect, guaranteed, optimal solution for large instances in a reasonable time. There might be inherent limits to what any computation can solve efficiently.
Are there more fundamental physical limits too?
Yes, basic physics imposes ceilings. The speed of light is an absolute limit on how fast information can travel, which limits computation speed in any large distributed system. Then there's Landauer's limit.
Landauer's limit. What's that?
It's a principle from thermodynamics that states there's a minimum amount of energy required to erase one bit of information. It's a fundamental physical cost to computation. This implies there's a limit to how energy efficient any information processing, whether biological or artificial, can ultimately become.
So AI might get superhuman, but probably not infinitely powerful or infinitely efficient in our physical universe.
That seems likely. Plus, there are things like fundamental uncertainty, unknown unknowns. Even a super intellect might hit walls due to things like true quantum randomness or the inherent unpredictability of chaotic systems like long-range weather forecasting. Perfect prediction might just be impossible for some things.
And current AI still makes mistakes, right? It's not perfect now.
Far from it. Even the most powerful AI systems today can be brittle, make errors, and lack true understanding of context or causation. That's why human-AI collaboration, that complementarity we talked about, is still seen as the ideal, at least for the foreseeable future, rather than just handing everything over to the machines.
Is there also an argument about diminishing returns?
Yes, some scholars argue that. The leap from, say, chimpanzee intelligence to human intelligence brought about language, science, art, revolutionary changes. But would doubling human-level intelligence again necessarily produce equally revolutionary breakthroughs? Maybe the gains become less dramatic at higher levels. Still, even with all these potential bounds, an AI significantly smarter than humans could still be incredibly powerful and potentially dangerous if not aligned with our goals. Hence the intense focus in the AI safety community.
Okay, so we have biological limits and computational limits, but you mentioned a third layer, institutional collective bounds, the limits of coordination, and you suggested these might be the most significant limits in practice.
I think that's a very strong argument. History is full of examples where simply having more intelligence or more intelligent people didn't automatically lead to better outcomes because coordination failed or incentives were misaligned.
Like the 20th century science example.
Exactly. Brilliant minds made incredible advances in physics and chemistry, but those advances were then channeled into devastating world wars and a terrifying nuclear standoff. The individual rationality was off the charts, but the collective rationality broke down spectacularly.
Why does collective rationality fail so often?
Often it's due to collective action problems and conflicts of interest. Think about climate change again. We largely understand the problem scientifically, and we arguably have the technological means to address it. It's rationally solvable on paper.
But we struggle to act effectively.
Right. Because of competing short-term economic interests, political disagreements, and a fundamental lack of trust between nations and different groups within nations, it's a coordination failure on a global scale.
This is where that dark forest idea comes back in.
It's a powerful metaphor for this. The original sci-fi concept was about alien civilizations hiding from each other out of fear in a potentially hostile universe.
How does that apply here?
It serves as an analogy for how even highly rational actors might behave in a low-trust environment. Instead of cooperating for mutual benefit, they might default to secrecy, deception, or even preemptive attacks because they fear others will do the same.
And there's a worry about an AI dark forest.
Yes, some AI philosophers worry that if we end up with multiple, powerful, unaligned AIs, maybe developed by competing nations or corporations, they could enter into a similar dynamic. A state of paranoid rivalry, focused on outcompeting or neutralizing each other, leading to arms races or digital conflict, rather than cooperating to solve problems.
And even without AI, we see coordination failures on basic truth today.
Absolutely. The political polarization we discussed earlier means groups often can't even agree on fundamental facts, let alone coordinate effectively to serve common interests. As Pinker points out, our Enlightenment ideals of reason and evidence constantly battle against our more primal tribal instincts and our tendency to create echo chambers and post-truth narratives. These tendencies can blunt the impact of all the knowledge and scientific understanding we accumulate.
So let's try to summarize these bounds. The ultimate capacity of intelligence, whether human or AI, seems to have real theoretical and practical limits. But perhaps even more importantly, even within those limits, coordination failures, problems with trust, incentives, and collective action can cap our realized collective rationality far, far below its theoretical potential.
That's the core insight. The bottleneck might not be how smart a single mind can get, but how well multiple minds can work together effectively and ethically.
Which brings us back to the superintelligence debate.
Right. Optimists hope that advanced intelligence, especially AI, might actually help us solve these coordination problems, maybe by designing better systems of governance or facilitating trust.
While pessimists worry it could make things worse.
Exactly. Pessimists fear that unless we solve the alignment problem, ensuring AI goals match human values and our own social coordination problems first, simply creating smarter agents could just amplify conflicts or lead to larger-scale catastrophes. It's the sorcerer's apprentice problem, again, a powerful tool pursuing a goal relentlessly, even if the goal was poorly specified or has unintended negative consequences.
Bostrom's warning is pretty stark here.
Very. He worries an artificial supermind might just reshape the future according to its own potentially alien preferences, possibly annihilating human values entirely if we don't figure out the control problem in time.
But then Pinker offers a counterpoint.
Yes. Proponents of progress like Pinker remind us that, historically, knowledge and reason have led to massive improvements in human flourishing. Their view is that if we continue to apply Enlightenment principles, reason, science, humanism, we probably can manage these new technological challenges successfully, just as we've managed others in the past. It's a fundamental disagreement about whether our past success is predictive of our future ability to handle unprecedented power.
Okay, let's take a breath and consolidate. We've just navigated the profound question of the ultimate limits of intelligence. What's fascinating here is that the boundaries aren't just about how smart a brain or an AI can be, but crucially, about how we, as a collective, manage to coordinate our intelligence.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's the interplay of biological, computational, and institutional limits. This raises an important question for our listeners. Knowing these constraints, how should we approach the future of rationality? Here are some key takeaways from this complex discussion. First, biological bounds. Our human brains have finite capacity, metabolic limits, and evolutionary baggage, like limited working memory and struggles with abstract logic.
Second, computational AI bounds. Even machines face limits from physics, like the speed of light and Landauer's limit, and some problems are just computationally intractable, NP hard.
Third, and maybe most critical, institutional bounds. Collective action failures, conflicting interest, lack of trust, and dark forest dynamics severely undermine our ability to act rationally as a group.
So there's a gap between potential and reality.
Big time. Capacity versus realization. Intelligence potential has bounds, but our realized collective rationality is often capped much lower by these coordination issues.
And finally, the AI dilemma.
Right, the superintelligence dilemma. AI could amplify our reason or exacerbate our conflicts, entirely depending on whether we solve the alignment and governance problems.
Okay, so facing these limits and the double-edged sword of AI, we arrive at a fundamental philosophical crossroads. It really feels like a divergence between optimism and pessimism about the future of rationality.
It really is. And on one side, you have figures like Steven Pinker, who are strong champions of what you might call long-view Enlightenment optimism.
What's the core of Pinker's argument?
His central thesis, backed up by enormous amounts of data in his books, is that rationality, science, and humanistic values have been the driving forces behind truly extraordinary progress for humanity across almost every measurable domain.
He points to concrete metrics, right? Not just abstract ideas.
It's exactly. Longer lifespans, vastly improved living standards, dramatic reductions in violence, and an unprecedented explosion of knowledge worldwide. He stresses these are real, tangible gains. And he also notes, somewhat wryly, that almost no one knows about it, that there's this huge gap between the actual positive trends and the often negative public perception.
And he doesn't see rationality hitting a ceiling.
But quite the opposite. Pinker tends to view rationality as a kind of self-reinforcing cycle. Reason and science solve problems, which builds confidence in reason, encouraging more people to embrace it, which helps us gradually overcome older modes of thinking like superstition or pure tribalism. It's an upward spiral, albeit a slow and sometimes contested one.
He also talks about institutions playing a key role, calling them objectivity pumps.
Yes, that's a great phrase he uses. He sees institutions like free speech, education, democracy, and scientific peer review as mechanisms of objectivity pumps that help filter out individual biases and errors over time, pushing society towards more rational and evidence-based conclusions.
So, free speech allows bad ideas to be challenged. Peer review vets scientific claims.
Precisely. These institutions, when functioning well, force ideas to compete based on merit and evidence. His whole approach is based on what he calls unsentimental history, stepping back, looking at the long-term data trends, and concluding that, despite setbacks, the overall trajectory for humanity has been positive, largely thanks to the application of reason.
How does he account for the current polarization and apparent irrationality, then?
He acknowledges these problems, of course, but might argue they are either temporary setbacks or perhaps more visible due to media dynamics, while underlying progress continues. He might point out that even amidst political conflict, global scientific collaboration, for instance, often continues, like the incredibly rapid development of COVID vaccines, through international effort. His fundamental belief is that collective rationality will likely keep rising, albeit unevenly, and that humanity will continue to get smarter, more enlightened, and better at applying reason to solve big problems like climate change or AI ethics.
Okay, that's the optimistic case.
Yeah.
But then you have the counterargument, the AI dark forest, pessimists and other skeptics. Their view is much bleaker.
Much bleaker. They worry we're not just approaching a peak, but maybe standing on a very precarious one, from which we could easily fall. They emphasize the fragility of those very systems Pinker celebrates. Their central fear is, What if our super powerful new technologies combined with our ancient, unchanged human biases create a truly toxic, potentially self-destructive mix?
And the specific fear around AI safety is central here.
It's a major one. Thinkers like Nick Bostrom and many in the AI safety community warn explicitly that a misaligned superintelligence could represent an existential catastrophe. That's a profoundly pessimistic scenario where our own rational creation inadvertently turns against us, not out of malice, but simply by pursuing a poorly defined goal with ruthless superhuman efficiency.
Beyond a single rogue AI, what other pessimistic scenarios do they envision?
Others focus more on geopolitics. In a world hyper-connected, but also bristling with AI-enabled weapons, cyber warfare tools, and sophisticated propaganda capabilities, could we descend into an intelligence dark age? A future where global distrust becomes so pervasive that cooperation completely breaks down.
That dark forest metaphor again.
Exactly. It paints a picture where every advanced actor, maybe nations with powerful AI, or even the AIs themselves, assumes others are hostile threats. So instead of collaboration, you get secrecy, preemption, constant maneuvering for advantage. In such a world, collective rationality might actually decline sharply.
How so?
Well, evidence-based consensus could totally evaporate. We see hints of this already with how social media can fragment reality. Strategic thinking might devolve into just elaborate games of outsmarting opponents without ever addressing the underlying shared problems. It's a future where having more knowledge doesn't lead to more wisdom. In fact, more knowledge might just fuel more dangerous fanaticism or enable more effective manipulation.
Can you give a vivid example of that?
Imagine superintelligent algorithms locked in high-frequency trading wars that crash markets, or autonomous cyber weapons escalating conflicts at speeds humans can't even comprehend. Each AI might be acting rationally according to its narrow programmed objectives, but the collective result could be utterly ruinous.
So the core of the pessimist's argument isn't that rationality is weak, but that we might fail to steer it collectively. It's coordination pessimism.
That's a great way to put it. They doubt our ability to achieve the necessary unity and guidance. We might be smart enough to build the tools, but maybe not wise or coordinated enough to use them harmoniously for the common good.
Is there a middle ground between these two extremes?
Yes, definitely. Many economic and policy analysts, like Kleinberg and his colleagues we mentioned, advocate for a more pragmatic middle path. They don't foresee inevitable utopia or inevitable apocalypse. Instead, they talk about the need for a hard slog, continuous incremental improvements.
What does that involve?
Things like constantly updating regulations for new technologies, investing heavily in education and digital literacy, fostering international cooperation on tricky issues like AI governance. It's about actively working to avoid the worst-case scenarios while patiently inching towards the better ones. Their key message is contingency. Our rational future isn't predetermined. It depends critically on the choices we make now and in the coming years.
Okay, this feels like a good moment for our recurring Pinker checkpoint. The question for this finale. Pinker claims reason and science will continue to elevate humanity. Based on everything we've explored, does that hold up?
Well, the answer has to be nuanced, doesn't it? We've seen truly compelling evidence supporting his view, incredible rational successes like AlphaFold, real progress on global poverty, better disaster prediction, huge wins for reason.
But also strong headwinds.
Exactly. Stubborn cognitive biases that resist easy fixes, deep political polarization, and worrying new challenges like deepfakes, potentially undermining the very notion of shared truth. So it's not a simple yes or no.
What's the key takeaway then?
Perhaps the most crucial insight is that rationality isn't some fixed trait we just possess more or less of. It's much more like an ongoing project, a dynamic process of continuous learning, correction, and adaptation.
And Pinker himself acknowledges failures of reason?
He does. He has that great line about how the beauty of reason is that it can always be applied to understand failures of reason. That suggests a path forward. We have to use rationality's own tools, critical thinking, evidence gathering, logical analysis, to constantly monitor and counteract our own irrational tendencies and the systemic failures they can cause. This brings us to a crucial philosophical fork in the road. On one side, Pinker's Enlightenment optimism, backed by historical data on progress in institutions as objectivity pumps. On the other, the dark forest pessimists, warning of misaligned superintelligence and the collapse of coordination. It raises an important question. What are the concrete scenarios that could play out, and how do we steer towards the better ones?
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's not about being blindly optimistic or resignedly pessimistic. It's about understanding the forces at play and making deliberate choices. So let's unpack some plausible future scenarios for collective rationality and see what levers we might have to pull. Okay, let's try to map out some of these potential futures. Futurists use scenario planning for this, sketching optimistic, middling, and pessimistic paths. It helps us mentally rehearse what might be coming.
Right. Let's start with scenario 1, rational renaissance, the optimistic view. This is the vision of a kind of new enlightenment where we successfully navigate the current challenges.
How do we get past the IQ plateau in this scenario?
Not necessarily through biological change, but through technology and education working together. Imagine truly universal internet access combined with sophisticated AI tutors. These wouldn't necessarily raise the ceiling of raw IQ, but they could significantly raise the floor of knowledge, critical thinking, and reasoning skills for everyone globally.
So things like statistical literacy become fundamental skills like reading.
Exactly. Statistical reasoning, critical thinking, they become core parts of education everywhere. And in this scenario, governments and tech companies have learned from earlier mistakes. They implement strong, effective ethical guidelines for AI.
Meaning things like algorithmic transparency, nudging for good?
Yes. Transparency becomes the norm so people understand how algorithms are influencing them. And the goal shifts from just maximizing profit or engagement to actively nudging for good, optimizing for things like user well-being, informed decision-making, maybe even societal benefit. Recommender systems actively try to broaden perspectives, not narrow them.
And AI becomes a true partner.
A trusted assistant. It powerfully amplifies human decision-making in critical areas like medicine, climate policy, scientific research, even complex logistics, without overriding human values or judgment. Collective intelligence really blossoms.
You mentioned the IQ of the hive.
Right. Imagine diverse teams of humans and AIs working together constructively, solving problems that were previously intractable, maybe curing major diseases, mediating long-standing conflicts, designing sustainable systems. The collective intelligence of the network grows exponentially.
What about polarization in this optimistic future?
It gets tempered, maybe through significant media reforms. Perhaps social networks are fundamentally redesigned to encourage respectful, cross-partisan dialogue, actively penalize the spread of blatant misinformation, and prioritize accuracy over outrage.
And internationally, do we avoid AI arms races?
In this scenario, yes. Nations managed to forge meaningful AI safety treaties, similar to how nuclear arms control treaties were negotiated. They find ways to cooperate on managing the risks. So basically, Pinker's optimism largely plays out. Knowledge keeps expanding, but it's coupled with growing wisdom and better coordination, leading to sustained progress and well-being. It's not a perfect utopia. Conflicts and biases still exist, but our institutions prove resilient and adaptive enough to keep improving rational governance.
Okay, that's the bright picture. What about the middle path? Scenario 2, muddling through the status quo trajectory.
This is the scenario where we avoid the worst disasters, but we also fail to achieve that grand renaissance potential. It's more of the same, really.
So progress kind of stalls.
In some areas, maybe IQ and basic education levels stagnate in wealthier nations and only improve very slowly elsewhere. People might be slightly better informed overall thanks to technology, but they're also easily and periodically misled by it.
And AI, does it take off?
It becomes more powerful, but mainly in narrow domains. Think expert systems, better logistics, maybe reliable autonomous vehicles. These bring economic gains, some scientific advances, but the benefits are spread very unevenly, possibly worsening inequality.
And we keep having issues with trust in AI.
Yeah, you see these cycles of techno-hype and backlash. A new AI tool gets adopted, say, in the justice system to try and reduce human bias. But then scandals erupt over algorithmic bias in the AI itself, or major privacy breaches occur. Public trust plummets, leading to stricter regulations, which then slows down deployment. Rinse and repeat.
So division persists. Filter bubbles, polarization.
They largely continue. Social media keeps sowing division. But maybe there are enough occasional bipartisan efforts or improvements in civic education to prevent a complete breakdown of shared reality. Society just muddles through.
Not collapsing, but not really thriving either.
Exactly. There's no unifying rational vision, but no descent into total chaos either.
Right.
Big global problems like climate change get partially addressed. Maybe emissions plateau due to some tech fixes and patchy cooperation, but the negative impact still mounts steadily. Political discourse stays pretty combative, though maybe younger generations, being more digitally native, develop a bit more immunity to the crudest forms of misinformation.
It sounds like 2 steps forward, 1.9 steps back.
That's a good way to put it. You still have pockets of brilliance. We might go to Mars, develop amazing new vaccines. But these coexist with persistent ignorance, culture wars flaring up, conspiracy theories causing real harm. The huge potential of collective rationality just isn't fully realized because we can't quite get our act together globally. And basic human nature, with all its flaws, remains the dominant factor.
Which brings us, inevitably, to the dark side. Scenario 3. The collapse of reason. The pessimistic view. This is where the forces undermining rationality really take over. What does that future look like?
It's pretty grim. Imagine a world where misinformation technology consistently outruns our ability to find and establish truth. Deepfake videos become indistinguishable from reality. AI generates floods of highly convincing, targeted disinformation. Hyper-partisan media completely fragments any sense of shared reality.
People retreat into bubbles.
Completely. Solipsistic information bubbles, reinforced by AI curators that have learned exactly how to trigger your emotions, outrage, fear, tribal loyalty for maximum engagement, cementing wildly distorted views of the world.
What happens to democracy and policymaking then?
They falter badly. If there's no consensus on basic facts, how can you make rational policy about anything? From pandemics to the economy, it becomes impossible. Internationally, the dark forest dynamic takes hold fully. Rampant mistrust, fueled by constant cyber attacks and AI-driven espionage, leads nations or powerful corporations to hoard AI advances or deploy them preemptively out of fear.
So AI arms races aren't just about weapons.
No, you get arms races and manipulation. Different factions wield incredibly sophisticated AI purely to sway minds, undermine opponents, spread propaganda. It leads to an environment some call the infopocalypse, a state of universal unreality where nobody knows what to believe.
And in this scenario, even superintelligence doesn't save us.
It doesn't. Either because we fail to align it with human values before we become too powerful, or because human conflicts and folly prevent a beneficial AI from ever emerging or being deployed safely.
Bostrom's scenario of a rogue AI fits here.
That's one variant. An AI escapes control and, indifferent to us, pursues some random misspecified goal like the famous paperclip maximizer example, potentially leading to catastrophe because humans are just obstacles or resources in its path.
Is there a slower version of collapse?
Yes, another variant isn't a single dramatic event, but a slow, grinding erosion. Critical thinking just gradually dies out, overwhelmed by a constant flood of AI-crafted nonsense, personalized propaganda, emotional manipulation. Society's collective decision-making becomes increasingly erratic, driven by fear, panic, and widely shared false beliefs.
Where could that ultimately lead?
It could eventually spiral into widespread social breakdown, violence, or perhaps new forms of tech-enabled authoritarian control, a kind of digital dark age. It sounds dystopian, but this scenario is really just an extrapolation of some of our worst current trends if left unchecked. Extreme polarization, unaccountable AI manipulation, the failure to align technology with human well-being. The pessimists paint this picture as a stark warning, urging us to take action now to prevent it.
It's sobering. But the crucial point is that none of these scenarios are set in stone. Which path we take depends on choices we make now. And the insights from the experts we've drawn on throughout this series offer clues about the levers we can pull.
Absolutely. They don't offer magic bullets, but they point towards concrete actions. Think back to Lita Kosmines on evolutionary psychology. Understanding our evolved biases for small group thinking can help us design modern institutions that fit our nature better, maybe framing messages in more relatable ways.
Or Carl Friston on the brain as a prediction machine. Can we train ourselves or use technology to make better predictions, to see reality more clearly, to reduce delusional pattern finding?
Or Judith Beck on cognitive behavioral therapy, the techniques used in therapy to identify and challenge cognitive distortions like catastrophizing or black and white thinking. Could those be scaled up through education to make everyone a better critical thinker in their daily life?
Antonio Rangel's work on neuroeconomics, understanding why we make impulsive or seemingly irrational choices, could help us design better choice architecture, nudges that gently guide us towards our own long-term interests, like saving for retirement without being coercive.
And Philip Tetlock's research on super forecasting gives real hope. It showed that ordinary people, with the right training in probabilistic thinking, evidence assessment, and aggregating diverse views, can become remarkably accurate forecasters. It proves that collective rationality can be systematically improved.
So each of these perspectives offers a potential tool, a lever we can pull to steer away from collapse, and maybe, just maybe, towards that rational renaissance, or at least keep us safely muddling through.
Okay, let's bring it all together. We've explored the spectrum of our rational future, from a hopeful renaissance to a potential collapse of reason. The key takeaway from these scenarios, and from our expert guides, is that this future isn't predetermined. It hinges on our deliberate choices. Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's about active foresight. This raises an important question. Knowing these potential paths, what practical steps can you take to navigate your own decisions and contribute to a more rational future? Here are the scenarios and some of the key insights for influencing them. Remember scenario 1. Rational renaissance requires universal education in critical thinking, ethical AI development, fostering that IQ of the hive, and strong international cooperation.
Scenario 2. Muddling through, characterized by stagnation in some areas, uneven AI benefits, cycles of techno-hype and backlash, and persistent division but stopping short of full collapse.
And scenario 3. Collapse of reason where misinformation dominates, leading to an infopocalypse, AI arms races and manipulation, erosion of critical thinking, and potentially a tech-fueled dark age.
And the levers we can pull based on the expert insights.
Cosmides. Design institutions that fit our evolved psychology.
Flynn. Explore ways to refine the brain's prediction engine.
Back. Apply CBT techniques widely for better daily reasoning.
Rangel. Use insights into valuation systems for better choice architecture.
Tetlock. Improve forecasting and judgment through training and feedback loops.
Okay, this brings us to the final chapter, the culmination, really. Building an actionable foresight framework. We've explored all these complex ideas, cognitive limits, AI's potential and perils, coordination failures, future scenarios. Now, how do we translate that into something genuinely useful for making better decisions?
Exactly. It can't just be abstract analysis. So, as our final synthesis, we want to offer what we're calling a high-stakes decision checklist. Think of it as a 7-step protocol, a kind of rationality compass to guide your thinking.
And this isn't just for, CEOs or policymakers. It's applicable more broadly.
Absolutely. The aim is for it to be useful, whether you're making a major life choice, tackling a complex problem at work, or yes, even thinking about societal issues. It pulls together insights from the entire series into a practical sequence.
All right, let's walk through the 7 steps of this rationality compass. Step 1.
Step 1. Clearly frame the problem and goals. This sounds basic, but it's absolutely critical. You have to start by defining exactly what decision you're facing. What specific problem are you trying to solve? And just as importantly, what does a good outcome actually look like? What are your objectives? What are the constraints?
Why is framing so important?
Because how you frame it dramatically affects everything that follows. As we discussed earlier in the series with cognitive framing biases, remember the gain versus loss framing. A poorly framed problem can lead you completely astray, solving the wrong issue entirely. Getting this first step right prevents mental wandering and ensures you're focused on the actual target.
Okay, step 1, frame clearly. Step 2.
Step 2, gather evidence, broadly and critically. Once the frame is set, you need information. Collect relevant data, facts, expert opinions. But the key here is broadly and critically. Actively seek out diverse perspectives. Go looking for information that challenges your initial hunches or existing beliefs.
To fight confirmation bias.
Exactly. This is your main defense against confirmation bias, that tendency to just look for stuff that agrees with you. Remember Pinker's point.
Yeah.
Reality often defies our intuition. You have to let the evidence lead, not just follow your gut feeling. Be a detective, not just a lawyer for your pre-existing opinion.
Makes sense. Step 3.
Step 3. Check your cognitive biases and assumptions. This is the introspective step. Pause and deliberately ask yourself, how might my own mind be tricking me here? Am I being overconfident? Recall the illusion of explanatory depth. We often think we understand something much better than we do until someone asks us to explain the details.
Like explaining how a zipper works.
Right. Or ask, are my emotions involved? Is tribal loyalty clouding my judgment? Am I getting defensive because this touches on my identity? Here, you can borrow techniques from CBT. Try articulating your reasoning out loud, step by step. Does it actually hold up logically? Play devil's advocate, actively argue the opposite case to yourself. It feels uncomfortable, but it's incredibly powerful for stripping away hidden biases and clarifying your real thinking.
Okay, so frame, gather evidence, check biases. Step 4.
Step 4. Apply quantitative and logical tools. Now you bring in the analysis. Use rational tools appropriate for the decision. This could range from a formal cost-benefit analysis or a probability estimate for a big decision down to a simple pros and cons list or maybe an expected value calculation for a personal choice.
Using the right tool for the job.
Precisely. Use statistics if needed. Apply logic rigorously. As we saw, statistical literacy is vital to avoid being misled by anecdotes. If you're dealing with uncertainty, try to quantify it. Tetlock's advice again, even a rough probability is better than just guessing yes or no, and ensure your conclusions logically follow from your premises. Avoid fallacies. This is where formal reasoning and forecasting techniques really pay off.
Step 5 takes us beyond our own analysis.
Step 5. Consider incentives and systemic effects.
Right.
No decision exists in isolation. You have to ask, what are the wider implications? How will other people or systems react? What are the game theoretic aspects? This connects back to our discussions on game theory and social dilemmas.
Like the prisoner's dilemma, where individually rational choices lead to a bad collective outcome.
Exactly. A policy that seems rational for one actor might provoke retaliation or unintended consequences elsewhere. Good foresight means thinking about not just the immediate first-order effects, but the second and third-order consequences too. Ask, and then what? Imagine how other rational agents or even irrational ones might respond to your move. Think systemically.
Got it. Step 6 involves looking ahead.
For step 6, envision alternative scenarios. Optimistic, middle, pessimistic. Just like we did earlier in this deep dive for society, do it for your specific decision. Map out different ways things could play out. What's the absolute best case scenario if everything goes right? What's the worst case if key things go wrong? What's the most probable muddling through middle ground?
Why is the scenario planning helpful?
It helps you prepare contingencies. It fights the planning fallacy. Our natural tendency to assume our plans will unfold smoothly without problems. By explicitly considering failure, you can build in safeguards. Or maybe decide the risk is just too high. Imagining success can also highlight the necessary conditions or resources you need to make it happen. It forces you to test your plan against possibilities.
Okay, final step. Step 7.
Step 7. Make the decision and implement with adaptive feedback. Eventually, you have to decide. Make the choice explicitly. But rationality doesn't stop there. You need to implement the decision in a way that allows for learning and adaptation. Build in a feedback loop.
How do you do that?
Define clear metrics or criteria beforehand that will tell you if the decision is actually working, if it's achieving the goals you set out in step 1. This relates to metacognition, monitoring your own thinking and outcomes. If new evidence comes in showing you were wrong, or the situation changes, a truly rational approach isn't to stubbornly dig in your heels, it's to update your beliefs and adjust your course.
You mentioned a pre-mortem.
Yeah, that's a useful technique here. Before you implement, imagine it's a year later and the decision has failed spectacularly. Ask yourself and your team, what went wrong? Identifying those potential failure points now allows you to mitigate them proactively. You can also do a pre-success analysis. Imagine wild success and ask, what factors enabled that to ensure they're in place? And throughout implementation, keep ethical considerations and human values front and center. Rationality isn't just cold calculation. It's about aligning actions with principles. So the summary is, execute, observe carefully, learn, and be prepared to adapt or even reverse course if reality gives you new information.
That's a really comprehensive checklist. 7 steps. Frame, gather evidence, check biases, apply tools, consider systems, envision scenarios, and implement adaptively.
Exactly. And you can think of this 7-step checklist as the final toolkit tile from our series. It pulls together the key lessons from cognitive science on biases, from AI on computational limits, from psychology on heuristics, from economics on incentives, into one pragmatic guide.
The goal isn't to be robots, right?
Not at all. It's not about eliminating intuition or emotion. It's about fostering reflective practice. It's about ensuring that when the stakes are high, whether it's a personal dilemma or a societal challenge, we move beyond just our initial gut reaction and bring the full power of reasoned analysis, foresight, and adaptation to bear.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, and indeed this whole exploration of rationality, where does it leave us? It feels like the future of reason is really hanging in the balance.
It does. The journey we've taken has consistently shown this duality, the incredible, almost unbelievable potential of human reason on one side, and its deep fragility, its susceptibility to bias and breakdown on the other.
We've seen the boundaries, biological limits in our brains, computational limits even for AI, and perhaps most frustratingly, the institutional or coordination limits that stop us from working together effectively.
But, and this is crucial, we've also seen that those boundaries aren't necessarily fixed. They can be pushed outwards. There are real sources of hope. The big picture trends show more people are educated, connected, and have access to information than ever before in human history. And we see these bright spots of collective intelligence succeeding global science, tackling pandemics, online communities solving complex problems together.
The key seems to be linking our cognitive abilities with better coordination.
That feels like the absolute crux of it. Ensuring our coordination keeps pace with our cognition. There's that great line from a review on collective intelligence. Collectives are intelligent, and intelligence is collective. Our real power, our species' superpower maybe, emerges when we effectively pool our minds and insights.
But that requires certain conditions.
It does. It requires cultivating shared epistemic values, a common ground based on respect for evidence, logic, and truth-seeking. And it requires building and maintaining robust institutions in governance, media, education, science that actively incentivize truth over lies and cooperation over destructive zero-sum competition.
So that Pinker checkpoint challenge comes back one last time. Can we prove him right? Can we ensure reason and science continue to lift humanity even as the challenges get more complex?
The coming AI century makes that question incredibly urgent. AI presents both a potential minefield, think bias, manipulation, misalignment, job displacement, and a potential goldmine for amplifying rationality and solving problems. The outcome really depends on us anticipating the pitfalls and actively doubling down on that Enlightenment toolkit. Critical thinking, open debate, universal education, and grounding everything in humane values. If we do that, we tilt the odds towards a much brighter future.
It's a powerful reminder. If you ever feel overwhelmed by the apparent irrationality in the world, just remember, we're the same species that figured out the structure of DNA, that developed vaccines in record time, that peered back to the origins of the universe. Our capacity for reason got us this far.
And with conscious effort, with care, with humility, it can carry us further. It's not guaranteed, but it's possible.
So the final call to action for you, our listener.
Take this rationality toolkit, this 7-step checklist, and the insights behind it, and try to put them into practice.
Start small in your own life.
Exactly. Start with your own decisions. Then maybe think about how these principles apply in your work, your community. Promote critical thinking, encourage fact-based discussion, maybe push back gently against misinformation when you see it.
Test a claim against data next time you're in a debate. Try to spot your own biases.
Those kinds of small individual acts, if millions, billions of us do them, they ripple outwards. They become the living network of collective intelligence. The future of rationality won't be decided by some abstract force or even by AI alone. It will be decided by us, by the choices we make individually and collectively.
So the final thought is one of empowered optimism.
Rational optimism, perhaps. With foresight, with humility about our own limitations, but with a belief in the power of reason, we can chart a path where rationality doesn't just survive the challenges of the 21st century, but actually thrives.